Laurie McFarland here with Cross My Heart Ministry. We're continuing to read and worship and pray and write our way through the book of Psalms. And this week I am looking at Psalm 36. I'm particularly drilling down on a couple of verses there where David is really worshiping God. And I think we can worship along with him. I think as I read these verses, they may even sound a little familiar because most assuredly you have read them and spoken them, perhaps memorized them, and you may have even sung them, because I think as I read these verses, they are going to sound very familiar to you. Psalm 36 verses 5 and 6 say this: "Your love, O Lord, reaches to the heavens, your faithfulness to the skies. Your righteousness is like the mighty mountains, your justice like the great deep." It's amazing to focus on God and just to stop and take time in our busy, harried, stressful world and focus on who he is and think about his character and his nature. And that's what David is helping us to do. He in our finite minds, it's difficult for us to fathom an infinite God. And so David uses these huge words, these monumental words, to say, God, you are huge. You are all the way to the heavens, to the skies, to the mountains, to the great deep. And so he just tries to worship God. He tries to think about who God is, and it's almost as if he's struggling and he's trying to find words that are monumental enough, magnificent enough, huge enough to adequately worship and describe God Almighty. He also drills down and hones in on 4 specific character traits of God. David talks about God's love, his faithfulness, his righteousness, and his justice. His love, his faithfulness, his righteousness, and his justice. And you know, it's easy for us to feel comfortable talking about one of those specific character traits, but really we need to embrace all of them when we think about who God is. And when we want to adequately describe God, we want to effectively worship God, we want to share God with other people, all 4 of those traits are necessary. And really, in a sense, that one of them constrains the other. God's love and his justice, his righteousness and his faithfulness are all necessary for him to be the God that he truly is. If we want to worship him, as Jesus said, in spirit and in truth, we have to embrace all 4. A God who is always loving but not faithful would be sort of capricious. A God who's always loving but not righteous or just would sort of be like a doting grandfather, very permissive, winking at our sin. Not a God who is righteous, and that's the God that we know him to be, but a God who is only just. A God who's only righteous would have such high standards. A God who is focused exclusively on justice would expect us to do perhaps horrible things at his bidding, and there would be no love to constrain that justice. A God who is only righteous would certainly not go to the cross and make a way for us to spend eternity with him. We, sister friends, need to be so profoundly grateful that we serve a God who is loving and just, a God who is righteous and who is faithful. All those characteristics of God describe who he is. And if we are going to worship him in spirit and in truth, we need to lean into this truth. There have been different denominations, different eras in history, different mindsets, maybe even different times in your own life when you've been very comfortable leaning into one direction or the other, very comfortable describing God as just and righteous, or you are very comfortable and describing God as always loving. But we distort a view of God when we focus on one of those character traits to the exclusion of the other. So if we are to worship God in spirit and truth, if we are to worship him in spirit with our heart and our emotions, if we're to worship him with our minds, with truth and logic, then we worship him truthfully. So worshiping him, as Jesus said over in John 4, in spirit and in truth, means that we lean into this truth of David. We embrace that. We believe it. We sing it. We declare it with our tongue and sing praises to God. We can join in with David when we take time and pause in our life, maybe in that daily time of quiet before him, maybe early in the morning before all of our duties begin, just to sit and be still before him. to ponder who He is. Let His Spirit just settle over your heart and mind, and fathom and think and wonder and marvel that the Creator of the universe, who knows you, who loves you so much, who had the power to speak this world into existence, is a God who is loving and faithful and righteous and just. And then when you have no words of your own, but a sense of worship bubbles up in your heart and your mind, the words that can come forth on your tongue, when you can't seem to grasp or find any that adequately worship Him, you can borrow some from David, and you can join with the psalmist in declaring, "Your love, O Lord, reaches to the heavens, your faithfulness to the skies. Your righteousness is like the mighty mountains, your justice like the great deep." Aren't we grateful that we serve such a mighty, powerful, wonderful God, that He is loving and righteous, and He is just, and He is faithful? Would you take some time today to worship and adore the amazing God that we serve? Thank you for reading through Psalms with us. I hope that you are blessed as you do. I hope it finds you knowing more about God, worshiping God. Leave us a note below and let us know what state or city or what you are worshiping God. Maybe just a word of declaration why you're worshiping Him today. For those of you that have subscribed, thank you. If you haven't yet, just click that big red subscribe button and you'll get a notification every time we post a new video. Until next week, I'm Laurie McFarland, and this is Cross My Heart Ministry.